The steel door slammed shut with a deafening clang. Another day began inside Redwood Maximum Security Prison, a place where mercy didn't exist, and strength was the only law that mattered. Through the hallway of echoing footsteps, a new inmate was escorted in. Tall, broad-shouldered, with calm, unreadable eyes. His name on the transfer sheet read Stephen G., but no one knew much else. He didn't look like the others. No tattoos, no nervous glances, no desperate attempts to fit in. He simply moved with quiet confidence, as if he'd been in worse places before. The guards exchanged looks. "That one's different," one muttered. "Doesn't flinch, doesn't blink." Another replied, "He won't last a week in here. Razor's boys will eat him alive." Razor, the ruthless leader of the prison's largest gang, ruled the yard with violence and fear. To him, newcomers were either soldiers or targets. And today, Razor's eyes locked onto Steven from across the cafeteria. During lunch, Steven sat alone at a corner table, eating in silence. Razor's crew swaggered over, laughing loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hey, old man," one of them sneered. "You sitting in our spot?" Steven didn't even look up. He calmly finished chewing, set his spoon down, and said in a low, steady voice, "There's room for everyone." The gang members froze for a moment, surprised by his tone. Not fear, not defiance, just control. Then Razor grinned wickedly. "You got guts, Grandpa. Let's see how long that calm lasts in the yard." A few inmates nearby exchanged glances. They'd seen men talk back before, none of them lasted long. But Steven didn't respond. He simply stood, placed his tray down, and walked away without another word. Something about the way he moved, deliberate, balanced, silent, sent a chill through the gang. As the lunchroom buzzed with whispers, one guard murmured, "That's no ordinary man." But when they cornered him in the yard later that day, what happened next shocked the entire prison. The sun burned hot over the concrete courtyard of Redwood Prison, turning the steel fences into shimmering walls of heat. It was recreation hour, the only time inmates could breathe air that wasn't recycled through iron bars. Steven stood alone near the far end of the yard, his hands clasped behind his back, watching a pair of crows circle high above the guard tower. He looked calm, too calm, but Razor and his crew were already watching him from across the yard. They'd been waiting all morning. "There he is," Razor growled, cracking his knuckles. "The quiet old man who thinks he's better than us?" One of his lieutenants, a thick-built inmate named Dingo, laughed. "You want us to take care of him, boss?" Razor smirked. "Nah, let's see how polite our new friend is when he's eating dirt." They started walking toward Steven, 6 men in total, tattoos crawling up their arms, eyes filled with menace. The other prisoners stopped lifting weights and turned their heads. Everyone in Redwood knew what was about to happen. Steven noticed them coming but didn't move. His expression stayed the same, patient, focused, unreadable. When the gang surrounded him, he simply said, "I thought you boys might come around." Razor stepped forward, towering over him. "You talk real calm for a guy about to lose some teeth." Steven glanced up slightly, meeting Razor's eyes. "Violence is easy. Control isn't." The words caught Razor off guard for a split second, but what he weighed, but pride wouldn't let him back down. "Control, huh? You'll be lucky to control your breathing when we're done with you." Dingo shoved Steven in the chest. The old man barely budged. Instead, he took a half step back, shifting his stance ever so slightly. Feet aligned, weight balanced. No one noticed, but years of combat training were already kicking in. "Hey!" Razor barked. "You deaf or just stupid? When I talk, you answer." Steven said nothing. His calm made the gang angrier. Around them, prisoners began forming a loose circle, phones and hidden cameras slipping out from sleeves. A guard up on the tower noticed the movement but didn't intervene. "Let 'em sort it out," he muttered. "They'll learn." Razor jabbed a finger at Steven's chest. "You're gonna regret stepping in this yard, old man." Steven finally spoke, quietly but clearly. "Son, you should walk away while you still can." The gang erupted in laughter. Razor doubled over, mocking the tone. "Walk away? You're in my house now." But there was something unnerving about Steven's stillness. His breathing was steady, his gaze sharp. No fear, not even annoyance, just focus. Then without warning, Dingo lunged forward. His fist shot toward Steven's jaw, Steven's right hand moved like lightning, a blur, precise and effortless. He caught Dingo's wrist midair, twisted it, and sent him spinning to the ground with a thud that silenced the yard. For a moment, no one moved. Razor blinked. What the hell was that? Dingo writhed, clutching his arm. Steven stepped back into position, his face as composed as before. "I warned you," he said simply. The crowd erupted in low murmurs. Someone whispered, "That wasn't normal." He knew what he was doing. Two more gang members charged in, swinging wildly. Steven ducked under one punch, redirected the attacker's momentum, and used a single palm strike to the chest. The man dropped instantly, gasping for air. The second attacker tried a cheap shot from behind, but Steven turned smoothly, trapping his arm and flipping him to the ground in one seamless motion. 3 men down. Less than 10 seconds, Razor's smirk was gone now. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Steven straightened his posture and said quietly, "Violence only leads to humiliation, and you're already halfway there." The inmates watching were frozen in disbelief. The only sound was Dingo groaning on the ground. From the tower, the guard finally shouted, "Break it up! Everyone step back!" But no one dared to move closer. Even the guards seemed hesitant. Razor's pride burned hotter than the sun above him. He stepped forward, fists clenched, his voice trembling between rage and fear. "You think you're some kind of tough guy? You have no idea who you're messing with." Steven tilted his head slightly. "You're right," he said. "You have no idea who you're messing with." The 2 men stared at each other, Razor shaking with fury, Steven calm as a shadow. The tension could be cut with a knife. And just as the guard sirens blared, signaling the end of yard time, Razor hissed, "We're not done. You'll pay for this tonight." Steven turned away, heading back toward his cell. Without looking back, he replied, "Then I'll be here." The rest of the inmates stood in stunned silence, realizing they had just witnessed something far beyond a prison brawl. This man, whoever he was moved like a soldier, not a criminal. Whispers spread fast. "Who is he? Did you see that move? Old guy's not human." As Steven walked back through the yard, his footsteps echoed. Calm, steady, controlled. Razor watched him disappear into the corridor, hatred boiling in his eyes. But deep down, even he could feel it. Fear. Have you ever seen someone stay calm under pressure like that? Drop your answer in the comments, and tell us which country and city you're watching this story from. The atmosphere inside Redwood Prison had shifted. Ever since that afternoon in the yard, everyone had been whispering about the mysterious newcomer who took down Razor's crew without breaking a sweat. By morning, Steven had already earned a silent reputation. Some inmates called him Ghost, others Sensei, but none dared to mess with him. The guards, too, had started to watch him differently, not as a threat, but as someone to stay clear of. Still, Razor wasn't one to let humiliation go unanswered. His swollen jaw and bruised pride were reminders of the beating he'd suffered in front of hundreds. He spent the night in his cell, pacing like a caged animal, fury burning through him. "Tomorrow," he growled to Dingo and the others, "we end him. I don't care who he is." The next day, during lunch hour, Steven sat alone again. Same corner, same calm posture. A few nearby inmates avoided sitting too close, like being near him was both protection and danger. Razor walked in with his men, eyes locked on Steven. The chatter in the cafeteria died down immediately. Even the guards sensed trouble but didn't intervene. They'd learned something the day before. Sometimes it was better to watch. Razor slammed his tray onto the table across from Steven. The sound echoed through the room. "You think you made me look weak yesterday, old man?" he hissed. Steven looked up slowly. His eyes were calm, unshaken. "You made yourself look weak," he said softly, "by trying to prove power to people who already fear you." A few inmates gasped quietly. Razor's face darkened. "You think you're some kind of philosopher?" "This ain't a movie, Grandpa." Steven leaned slightly forward. "No, son. This is real life. The difference is I've spent mine learning how to end violence before it starts. Yours only know how to cause it." Razor's patience snapped. He lunged forward, swinging his fist with all his rage. But Steven was already gone, moving like a whisper of air. The punch sliced through empty space. Before Razor could blink, Steven's hand locked his wrist, his other arm pivoting in perfect motion, and crack. Razor hit the floor hard, gasping for air as pain shot through his shoulder. Gasps filled the cafeteria. The entire room froze as Steven stood over him, composed as ever. But Razor's men weren't about to let their leader fall again. They rushed him all at once. The first came from behind with a shiv. Steven turned, sidestepped, and disarmed him with one fluid twist. The weapon clattered to the ground and Steven kicked it away without breaking rhythm. Another attacker charged from the front. Steven ducked, pivoted, and used the man's own weight to flip him clean over the table. Plates and food trays went flying. A third tried to tackle him low. Steven stepped aside, using his elbow to drop the man instantly with a single strike to the back of the neck. The whole fight lasted less than 10 seconds. When it was over, 5 men lay groaning on the floor. Steven hadn't even broken a sweat. From the upper level, 2 guards exchanged wide-eyed looks. What just happened? That wasn't prison fighting. That was military training, one murmured. Down below, Steven turned to Razor, who was clutching his shoulder, trembling between rage and humiliation. I told you to walk away, Steven said. His tone wasn't mocking, it was quiet, heavy, almost regretful. Razor stared up at him, his pride shattered. But he still tried to sneer. You don't scare me. Steven gave him a long look. You're not afraid of me, he said softly. You're afraid of who you'll have to be when the fear stops controlling you. The words hit Razor harder than the throw had. Around them, the cafeteria buzzed with awe. One inmate whispered, he's not human. Another muttered, that guy's trained. Military style. As the guards finally stormed in, Steven didn't resist. He raised his hands calmly, letting them escort him away as if nothing had happened. Even the warden watched through the glass above, brow furrowed. Who is that man? He whispered to his deputy. No one fights like that. Back in his cell, Steven sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, breathing steadily. His knuckles were unmarked, his expression peaceful. For him, the fight had never been about dominance, it was about restraint. A test of control in a place where chaos ruled. He closed his eyes, murmuring a quiet line from memory. Peace isn't found in the silence after violence. It's found when you no longer need to fight. The camera of one guard's body cam caught the entire cafeteria fight. By nightfall, that footage had already begun to circulate among inmates, and soon after among staff. Steven Seagal's legend had officially entered the prison walls. If you were one of those inmates watching the fight, would you try to help? Or stay as far away as possible? Comment your answer below. By the next morning, Redwood Prison was buzzing like a hornet's nest. Every corner, every hallway echoed with one name, Steven. The story of the cafeteria fight had spread faster than wildfire. Some said he moved faster than the human eye could follow. Others claimed he didn't even blink when surrounded by Razor's entire gang. Rumors twisted into myths. But one thing was certain. The old man was not to be messed with. Inside the prison yard, inmates whispered while pretending to lift weights. Guards exchanged quiet looks. Even Razor's gang members walked with their heads down, bruised and humbled. One of them muttered, I swear he's ex-military. No normal guy moves like that. Another replied, military? Now that's some next-level martial arts stuff. My cousin saw a movie once. Said there was this fighter who could end a fight in seconds. Looked just like him. The name slipped out for the first time. Steven Seagal. At first, no one believed it. What, the Steven Seagal? The Hollywood guy? Man, what would a movie star be doing in here? But the more they thought about it, the more it made sense. The calm, the discipline, the precision, the way he fought. It wasn't rage-driven, it was art. Meanwhile, deep inside the warden's office, a conversation was taking place. Warden, you might want to see this, said Officer Daniels, holding a folder of classified papers. The warden adjusted his glasses, eyes narrowing. What am I looking at? Background on inmate Stephen G. came through from federal transfer records. Says here he's former military, special operations. The warden frowned. Delta Force? Daniels nodded. Not just that. Seagal worked with counter-terror units back in the 80s. He's listed as an advisor for joint strike training. That's top-level clearance, sir. The warden leaned back in his chair, stunned. So he's not just some street fighter. No, sir, Daniels said quietly. He's a legend. That afternoon, while most inmates were in the yard, Razor sat alone in the infirmary, staring at his bandaged shoulder. His pride was broken. He replayed the fight over and over in his mind. How effortlessly the man moved, how every strike had purpose. There was no anger, no chaos, only skill. When Dingo limped in, Razor didn't even look up. "He's not normal," Dingo said. Razor's jaw clenched. "Who is he?" "They're saying he's Steven Seagal. The actor. The fighter. The ex-Delta Force commander." Razor laughed bitterly. "You expect me to believe that Hollywood crap?" But even as he said it, doubt flickered in his eyes. In another corner of the prison, Steven quietly mopped the hallway, assigned janitorial duty as punishment for the incident. He didn't complain. He never did. An older inmate named Cooper approached him. "They're saying you're Seagal. That true?" Steven gave a small smile. "People say a lot of things, Cooper. So it's true then?" Steven's eyes softened. "Does it matter?" Cooper shrugged. "Guess not. But if it is, you sure picked the wrong place to retire?" Steven chuckled quietly. Sometimes life picks the place for you. Later that evening, while the inmates were returning to their cells, Razor's crew gathered in the shadows near the laundry room. Dingo spoke in a low voice. "We can't let this stand, man. He humiliated you." "Everyone's laughing." Razor glared at him. "You think I don't know that?" He leaned closer, whispering, "Tomorrow night. No guards, no cameras. I'll finish what I started." The men nodded, though fear lingered in their eyes. What they didn't know was that the same guard they'd bribed for information had quietly passed word to the warden. "Razor's planning something," the guard said. The warden sighed. "If he's smart, he'll drop it. If not," he paused, "then he'll learn what it means to cross a legend." That night in his cell, Steven sat in meditation, eyes closed, posture still. He could sense it coming. Trouble. His instincts, sharpened through decades of training, told him Razor wasn't done, but he wasn't afraid. He remembered the words of his old commanding officer. "True warriors don't seek battle, but when battle seeks them, they end it with purpose." Steven opened his eyes slowly, a faint gleam reflecting off the dim prison light. Somewhere down the hall, Razor's footsteps echoed. By morning, even the guards treated Steven differently. They called him Mr. Seagal now, half respect, half awe. When he walked the yard, people moved aside, not out of fear, but reverence. A young inmate approached him hesitantly. "Sir, is it true you trained with the Delta Force?" Steven smiled faintly. "A man learns many things in life. The hardest lesson is knowing when not to use them." The young man nodded, inspired. "You didn't have to fight those guys yesterday." "Why did you?" Steven paused, then answered quietly. "Because sometimes silence teaches nothing. Some men only learn when the wind hits them in the face." By the end of the day, one truth was clear inside Redwood Prison. Steven wasn't just another inmate. He was something else, something legendary. But Razor wasn't done. He had a plan, and this time he wasn't coming alone. But when Razor's gang ambushed him the next night, they had no idea who they were truly dealing with. Night fell over Redwood Prison, cloaking the compound in uneasy silence. The air was heavy, thick with tension, the kind that made even seasoned guards restless. Most inmates were locked in their cells, but deep within the laundry block, shadows moved. Razor and his crew had gathered 5 of them this time, armed with sharpened makeshift blades and rage-fueled intent. "This is it," Razor whispered, voice trembling with hate. "No more humiliation. No more games. Tonight the old man goes down." Dingo nodded reluctantly. "What if the rumors are true, Razor? What if he's really—" "Shut up," Razor snapped. "He bleeds like the rest of us." What none of them realized was that Steven already knew. Inside his cell, Steven sat still, eyes closed, breathing slow and even. His senses picked up every sound. The creak of the hallway gate, the shuffle of boots, the whisper of metal scraping against concrete. He opened his eyes, calm, focused, ready. When the guards called for laundry duty volunteers that night, Steven raised his hand. It was the perfect opportunity, and he knew Razor would take it. The laundry room was dimly lit, the hum of the industrial dryers masking any noise. Steam filled the air. Shadows flickered against the walls. Steven was folding sheets at the back when the door creaked open. Razor entered first, blade in hand, followed by Dingo and 3 others. Their eyes burned with vengeance. "Well, look who decided to work late," Razor sneered. Steven didn't look up. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. Razor smirked. "Neither should you, Seagal. For a moment, the name echoed through the air. Then Steven exhaled slowly, folded one last sheet, and turned around. The room went silent. His posture was loose but balanced, the stance of a man who had stood in 1,000 fights and survived them all. "You've made your choice," Steven said softly. "Now live with it." Razor lunged first. Steven moved like water, sidestepping with effortless precision. Razor's blade slashed through empty air. In the same motion, Steven trapped his wrist, twisted, and disarmed him in a single fluid motion. Crack! Razor's arm buckled. Before the others could react, Steven used Razor's own body as a shield. One attacker hesitated too long. Steven pivoted, delivering a controlled strike to the man's ribs, sending him sprawling. Dingo charged from behind with a shout. Steven ducked, grabbed a handful of laundry sheets and wrapped them around Dingo's arm mid-swing, immobilizing him completely. A sharp knee to the stomach, a wrist lock, and Dingo dropped like a stone. The next man tried brute force, swinging wildly, but Steven moved with surgical precision, redirecting every attack. His movements were silent, efficient, almost too fast to follow. Within seconds, 4 men were down. Razor stumbled backward, clutching his broken wrist, eyes wide with disbelief. What are you?" he gasped. Steven stepped forward, calm as ever. Just a man who's seen too much. Razor swung again with his uninjured arm, a desperate, clumsy move. Steven caught the punch midair and spoke softly. "You think strength comes from hate. It doesn't. It comes from peace and control." Then with a precise twist, he brought Razor down to the floor. The fight was over. From the hallway, a guard who had heard the commotion burst in. His flashlight beam froze on the scene. 5 inmates on the ground, laundry scattered everywhere, and Steven standing silently in the middle, breathing slow and steady. "What the hell happened here?" the guard demanded. Steven quietly raised his hands. "They attacked me," he said simply. The guard stared at him, realizing the truth without needing proof. "You took down all 5 of them?" Steven looked at the floor. "They left me no choice." The next morning, Razor and his men were sent to solitary confinement. Word spread instantly. The old man had dismantled the most feared gang in the prison twice, and hadn't even been touched. The legend grew louder. Inmates began calling him Commander Ghost Sensei, and for the first time in years, peace settled over the prison yard. Even the guards noticed it, but one man wasn't surprised: the warden. He summoned Steven to his office. "You could have killed them," the warden said, staring at the report. "But you didn't. Why?" Steven's answer was quiet, almost reflective. "I didn't come here to prove I'm dangerous," he said. "I came here to prove I'm not." The warden leaned back, studying him carefully. "You're not just an inmate, are you?" Steven gave a faint smile. "Just a man trying to keep peace in a place that's forgotten what it means." The warden nodded slowly. "You're full of surprises, Seagal." Steven turned to leave. "Only when people force me to be." That night, the prison was quieter than it had been in years. Men who had spent their lives fighting sat in silence, thinking about what they'd witnessed. One man defeating hate not with rage, but with discipline. Somewhere in the dark, Razor sat in solitary, staring at the wall, Steven's words echoing in his mind. Strength comes from peace, not hate. For the first time in his life, he wasn't angry. He was ashamed. If you were in Steven's place, surrounded by 5 armed men, what would you have done? Drop your answer below, and don't forget to tell me which country and city you're watching from. But the real shock came days later, when a government official arrived at the prison and revealed Steven's true identity. 3 days had passed since the ambush in the laundry room, and Redwood Prison had changed. The once chaotic yard was quiet. The fights had stopped. The gangs kept to themselves. Even the guards noticed. The air felt different. The reason? One man. The calm, silent inmate who never raised his voice yet commanded more respect than any warden ever could. Early that morning, the loudspeaker crackled. "Inmate 2276, Stephen G. Report to the warden's office immediately." The entire block went silent. Stephen stood, folded his blanket neatly, and walked toward the hall. Every eye followed him. Some curious, some reverent, some afraid. Dingo, still limping from the last encounter, whispered, "That guy's not human, man. I swear he's something else." As Steven entered the warden's office, two men in dark suits were waiting. They weren't prison staff. Their polished shoes and stone-cold expressions said otherwise. The taller one spoke first. "Mr. Seagal, or should I say Commander Seagal?" The room fell silent. The warden looked up sharply. "Commander?" The man handed over a file stamped classified, Delta Force Operations. "Yes," the agent said calmly. "Steven Seagal, former Delta Force operative, Special Assignments Division. He worked in black operations during the late 80s and early 90s. Technically, he's still under federal protection." The warden's mouth dropped open. "You're telling me a former Delta Force commander has been sitting in my prison for months?" Steven didn't react. He simply said, "I was fine where I was." The shorter agent stepped forward. "Commander, you shouldn't even be here. You were framed during a covert case and we've been trying to clear your name for weeks." The warden looked from Steven to the agents. "Framed?" Steven nodded slightly. "Old enemies. Wrong place, wrong time. I didn't fight the charges because sometimes silence says more than defense." The taller agent sighed. "You're free to go, sir. Washington has reinstated your clearance." For a moment, the warden didn't move. The idea that a man like this, a disciplined, humble warrior, had been behind those steel bars felt surreal. He stood and extended a hand. "Mr. Seagal, or should I say Commander, it's been an honor." Steven shook his hand firmly. "Honor doesn't come from titles, Warden. It comes from how we treat people who have none." News traveled faster than lightning. By lunchtime, every inmate in Redwood knew the truth. The quiet janitor wasn't just some old man. He was Steven Seagal, a living legend, former Delta Force commander, martial arts master, and global peace advocate. Inmates stood in stunned silence as he walked the corridor for the last time. Some nodded respectfully. Others whispered thanks, even Razor, in solitary confinement, requested one final word with him before he left. The guards hesitated but agreed. Inside the small, dimly lit cell, Razor sat on his bunk, looking smaller than ever. He didn't speak right away. Finally, he muttered, "You could have killed me. Why didn't you?" Steven looked at him calmly. "Because you weren't my enemy. You were just lost." Razor swallowed hard. "You broke me, man. You broke my pride." Steven shook his head. "No, I freed you from it." The words hit harder than any punch ever could. Razor's eyes glistened. For the first time, he nodded respectfully. "Thank you." Steven gave a faint smile. "Take care of yourself, son." Then he turned and walked out, leaving Razor in silence, staring at the floor, something new burning inside him, humility. Outside, as Steven walked toward the main gate escorted by the two federal agents, dozens of inmates pressed against the fences, watching. The man who had taught them respect through silence was finally leaving. When he reached the gate, a voice called out from the yard, "Hey, Commander! You showed us what real strength looks like." Another shouted, "You changed this place." Steven turned, smiled faintly, and nodded. "Change yourselves, that's what matters." The heavy gates creaked open. Sunlight spilled across his face for the first time in months. He stepped out, free. Outside the prison walls, news vans were already waiting. Somehow the story had leaked. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions. "Mr. Seagal, is it true you stopped a prison riot single-handedly? Were you undercover? What will you do next?" Steven simply smiled. "Just going home." As the agents escorted him to the black SUV, one of them said quietly, "You know, Commander, you could have used your name any time. Why stay silent all this time?" Steven looked out the window. "Because fame means nothing without integrity. A man's true strength is measured by how he behaves when no one's watching." The agent nodded slowly. "Respect, sir." That night, footage from inside Redwood, secretly recorded by a guard, began to spread online. The video of Steven calmly dismantling Razor's gang went viral in hours. Millions watched in disbelief as the world realized the legendary Steven Seagal had been imprisoned and had handled injustice the only way he knew how, with discipline, control, and honor. If you found out a quiet man in your neighborhood was secretly a legendary hero, how would you react? Comment your answer, and tell me what country you're watching from. But the story didn't end there, because what Steven did after leaving prison inspired millions around the world and changed lives forever. Days turned into weeks, and the story of Steven Seagal, The humble prisoner who stood for peace was spread across the world. From news outlets to social media, everyone was talking about the mysterious man who had once lived among killers yet refused to become one. Clips from the prison's security cameras played on repeat. Steven standing still as chaos unfolded around him, disarming gang members without anger, without hate. People didn't just see a fighter. They saw a man who embodied control, humility, and true strength. In the Philippines, where Steven had once trained local soldiers, people lit candles in his honor. In the US, veterans groups called him a warrior of peace. Even inside Redwood Prison, something remarkable happened. Violence dropped by 60% in the weeks after his release. The inmates who once ruled through fear were now teaching others meditation, respect, and discipline, all because of the example Steven left behind. Meanwhile, Steven returned to his quiet cabin near Lake Tahoe. There, surrounded by still waters and mountain silence, he finally breathed freely. Each morning, he practiced Aikido alone on the dock, the same graceful movements that had once saved his life countless times. But this time it wasn't about combat. It was about balance. One day a reporter tracked him down. "Mr. Seagal, the world wants to know. After everything that happened, what's next for you?" Steven smiled gently. "What's next?" "Teaching peace. Not the kind you read in books and the kind you live through pain." The reporter leaned forward. "Do you forgive the people who attacked you?" Steven nodded slowly. "Of course. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's freedom. You can't heal the world by holding on to hate." A few weeks later, Steven was invited to speak at a rehabilitation conference for former inmates and soldiers. When he took the stage, the crowd fell silent. He wasn't dressed like a celebrity, just a simple black shirt, calm eyes, and a posture that radiated peace. He began quietly. "I've spent my life learning how to fight. But true mastery isn't in defeating others. It's in defeating yourself. Your ego, your anger, your hate." He looked across the crowd, men who had made mistakes, women who had suffered, young soldiers still haunted by trauma. "Inside that prison, I saw what fear does to people. It turns them into what they hate most. But I also saw what happens when you give them respect. They start to remember they're human again." A deep silence followed. Then a wave of applause. Some even stood up, tears in their eyes. The message hit home. Back in Redwood, Razor watched that very speech from the prison TV room. His eyes glistened as Steven spoke about peace and redemption. He turned to Dingo and said softly, "He's right, man. We wasted our lives fighting ghosts." From that day, Razor became one of the prison's first mentors, teaching discipline and restraint to young inmates. When reporters later asked who inspired him to change, he simply said, "A man who could have killed me, but chose to save me instead." Months later, Steven stood once again on his lakeside dock, the sun setting behind him. His phone buzzed with notifications, clips of his speech, interviews, documentaries. But he ignored them all. He wasn't doing it for fame. He never was. He bowed to the horizon and whispered, "Peace begins when you stop fighting the world and start mastering yourself." The wind rustled the trees, carrying his words across the water. For a long moment, everything was still. If you believe real strength comes from peace, not violence, type respect in the comments. And remember, never judge someone by how they look, because the quietest person in the room might just be a legend in disguise.